And welcome back to another episode of Sitting Courtside. Of course, it's your boy Jerry D here, but got a couple of guests with me today, kind of spicing things up a little bit. We have Tomer Zarley, who covers the LA Clippers for Clutch Points here, so great to have him on board. And obviously, probably a familiar face for you guys on Twitter that probably see Tim MacMahon, ESPN's very own NBA reporter, as well as the author of a new book, The Wonder Boy. How we doing today, guys? What's new in the hood with everybody here?
Howdy, partners. It is a pleasure to be here, especially with Tomer, a guy who I've dominated in pickup basketball on multiple occasions.
He has, actually. He's got that mid-range jumper. Doesn't like to get back on defense, though. I've noticed that. Doesn't like to get back on defense. But it's great to
liability.
It's great to have Tim here, though, and it's great to just have a guy that I've been watching from afar and also been covering the league with. Sure. So no, thank you for being here with us, Tim. It's been great, awesome. Thank you. I think we're all here to talk about your new book. The exact title, The Wonder Boy, Luka Doncic and the Curse of Greatness.
Heavy.
That's a hefty title right there. Yeah, I want to start off by asking, how did you kind of come together with that title? Like, what inspired you for that title and for you to start writing the book?
So the premise of the book is the pressure on a franchise when you draft a prodigy through the prism of Luka and the Dallas Mavericks. And the curse of greatness is that pressure. Build it or they might leave. We've seen this play out time after time after time. LeBron James' first run in Cleveland, obviously, the decision kind of ushering in the era of player empowerment. Not that it was the first time a guy left the team, but, that really changed the league. Kevin Durant in Oklahoma City, and on and on and on. And while Luka never was looking for reasons to leave, there is that pressure that's on a franchise, especially when there are as many missteps as the Mavericks made. They make this massive swing for Kristaps Porzingis months into Luka's career. At the time, it was an extremely popular trade in Dallas, but that deal fizzled. That duo didn't click. Then they bungled the Jalen Brunson situation after still managing to make the Western Conference Finals, lose him for nothing. The Kyrie trade, they were very fortunate to be able to get him for pennies on the dollar because his value was depressed with everything that happened in Brooklyn, but it didn't pay immediate dividends, right? They had to tank to keep the top 10 protected picks still owed from the Porzingis deal at the end of that. And then somehow they scrambled to actually successfully build a contender around Luka Doncic, go to the finals last year. He's happy. He's envisioning his whole career in Dallas just as they always hoped. Now it's a plan. And then, it was a nice happy ending to the book. And then things changed a little bit. Just a little after midnight Eastern time on February 2nd. Just a wee little plot twist at the end. You did all this stuff, recovered from all this drama, this dysfunction, all the twists, all the turns. You got there. You built a contender. He's happy. He's ready to sign that Supermax. He's committed long-term. And you decide to dump him months after this dude was 34, 10, and 9 in the regular season, led the league in scoring, and then led your team to the finals. So the book was put to bed. There is an extra chapter. The early copies, you gotta get that thing sent to you because it was 6 weeks out from publication date. But there is an extra chapter that addresses, frankly, the most shocking trade, certainly in NBA history, I think probably in pro sports history. And it was a unprecedented deal. I did not envision the story in that way.
So I know Jerry had a question for you, but I wanted to ask you just what was it like finishing a book? First of all, writing a book in general is incredible. So congratulations on that. But having to go, wait, I have a whole other chapter to write because this incredible trade that absolutely no one saw coming shifted the entire, weight of the NBA, but also probably what you were writing in general.
Oh man, it was so first of all, obviously I've got a full-time job at ESPN and that's always been the priority. This book was a summer project over the last few summers because during the season, I've got to be committed to my day job. And it was a pretty busy time for me at ESPN after this trade. Not only this trade, but it's like days before the trade deadline. So I've got this one in my backyard. I'm based in Dallas. I'm in Oklahoma City the day of the deadline. But the night before Kevin Durant and the Suns are there. So I was on that saga. But It was about an hour and a half after the trade, after I'd gotten a lot of reporting done. Just before I hopped on with Bontemps and Wendy to record an emergency podcast on the Hoop Collective, I sent an email to my book agent, people at the publishing company, like, hey, we got to meet. Like, we got to figure something out. And so I was able to turn around that final chapter in 13 days. Not a lot of sleep during that time. But look, from a storytelling perspective, I mean, what an incredible plot twist. What a shocking turn of events. The content, like, oh my God. I mean, it turned from a happy ending into a tragedy for Mavericks fans. But, the book ended up being the complete story of the Luka Doncic era in Dallas, from the tanking before he got here to be in position to get him, all the way through the shocking trade and the massive protests that happened in response to it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I want to piggyback off of, actually, because you mentioned what it was like, the tanking beforehand, the old twilight years of Dirk Nowitzki. What was it like leading up to the NBA draft before Luka was even thought of to be part of that organization? And then take me through that, and also when he actually does get drafted in those first few months of just having him in the building.
Yeah, so Dirk obviously is one of the all-time greats, the greatest player in Mavericks history. I mean, the statue outside the arena of him shooting that 1 foot fadeaway says loyalty never fades away. 21 letters, it sums up 21 years of Dirk Nowitzki in Dallas. But the twilight was wasted. Like, he got to the top of the mountain, and it was an incredible journey to get there, winning that championship. And then again, there was a lot of personnel mistakes, a lot of decisions that didn't pan out. And really from that title on through his twilight, it was wasted. The Mavericks didn't win another playoff series with Dirk in uniform. And then it gets to a point where they got to bottom out. They got to tank, because they're not like stuck in the bottom of the middle, right? Like stuck, if you're looking at it from a body perspective, the Mavericks were right around the butt of the NBA, right? And it didn't have a realistic path out of that unless they bottomed out and got another generational talent to build around. And so they tanked like hell. I mean, Cuban paid a $600,000 fine because he said the quiet part out loud and admitted that they were tanking. And, then they still get bumped back a couple spots in the lottery. They were so fortunate. 3 teams passed on this guy. The Suns, who just hired the Slovenian national team coach, Igor Koshkov, didn't care what he had to say. They were picking DeAndre Ayton. The Kings, Vlade Divac, a Balkan basketball legend, he didn't think Luka was good enough. He didn't think he was the guy that they wanted on their roster. And then the Hawks, they had Luka and Trey, look a little bit above, but okay, we can get an extra lottery pick. Let's do that. Mavericks were able to trade up and get this kid. And I'll be honest, I don't study the draft a lot. Obviously I'd heard about him. Mina Kimes had a great story on Luka that ran on ESPN.com his final year in Real Madrid. So, a few months before the draft, I knew the kid was a talent. I didn't know he was like this. But it was very clear very early. And I remember it was like a month into his career. And this is the Rockets, the Chris Paul, James Harden, contending Houston Rockets are in town. Luka didn't play very well for the first 3.5 quarters. Mavericks are down. Then Luka goes on a personal 11-0 run. And you're like, okay, this guy is not only destined for superstardom, but he's getting there sooner than later. And it was clear that early when he was still a teenager.
Now, you touched on a little bit of his upbringing there with how quickly he was a star. Again, as someone who covers the Clippers, we had to see him multiple times. He torched them. I think he enjoys playing that team more than anyone else in the NBA. But it was very evident early on, like you mentioned, that he was just going to be a star. But I wanted to touch on maybe a little bit of his upbringing and what in the book can you kind of share about his upbringing? Because I think, he was a professional since he was 13 years old or something, or 12 years old, something like that. So he was already living a very different lifestyle. Obviously, European basketball, a lot different than American basketball, how kids go here. So what can you kind of tell us about his upbringing?
Yeah, and so I've got a deal in there where he's playing this championship game of a tournament when he was 12 years old, a tournament in Italy, and the guy had a 54-point triple double. And there's footage of it out there. And I went back and watched it. Dude had a 54-point triple double, and it's like he's scoring at will, and then he's just messing around like Luka. So he's always been a guy who he plays with flair. He was hunting Heifetz. He's nutmegging kids in the backcourt, throwing no look passes. I mean, just the whole thing. And so he at that age, like it was already known throughout Europe, like, hey, there's a kid in Slovenia who's pretty special. And and he grew up around basketball. Like he was there's a picture in the book, it's kind of a famous picture, where he's 8 or 9 years old and he's grabbing a trophy. It's an Adriatic League championship trophy. And the team, the pro team, I forgot exactly which team it was. One of Ljubljana, it was Union Olympia in Ljubljana. So his dad's back there, Sasha Doncic. He's kind of like the Charles Barkley of Slovenia, 6-time Adriatic League All-Star, liked to have a good time, big gregarious personality. Marko Milic, who was the first Slovenian player drafted, ended up being on the Mavericks staff the last few years as an assistant coach. He was the star of that team. He's back there. Teenage Goran Dragic. This was his first pro team. But Luka's the ball boy on that team because, he grew up. Like he was Sasha's son. That's what he was known as a kid in Slovenia. And then he was, by the time he was 12, he went from being Sasha's son to, Sasha's son is special. And he became,
Right.
It was known like this kid Luka's got a chance. Real Madrid signed him at 13. And, Real Madrid signs a lot of guys to play in their academy. They don't sign a lot of guys who go there at 13 and while they're learning the language are dominating 15 and under, or dominating 16 and under. Guys who at 15 are playing or practicing rather with their top team. Real Madrid is like the Lakers of Europe. Like this is a perennial EuroLeague power. Luka's practicing with his team. And I've talked to like Billy Hernan Gomez, the Hernan Gomez brothers. They were kind of like Luka's big brothers there, but they're on this team. And like Billy was like, dude, he wasn't just practicing, like he was hooping in practices at 15 with like EuroLeague legends. 16, he's on the roster. 17, he's like a critical part of the rotation. 18, this guy's the EuroLeague MVP, EuroLeague Final Four MVP. By the way, the summer before that, he's playing for the Slovenian national team in Eurobasket. Him and Goran Dragic are the co-stars. Dragic was the only NBA player on the roster. They won Eurobasket. So a country of 2 million people, right? 2 million people. This is like say there's like state, like every state has a team and like there's an American tournament. This would be like if Idaho won the American tournament. You know what I'm saying? Just kind of put it in perspective. Tiny little country and was dominant against like Kristaps Porzingis in Latvia in that against, Ricky Rubio and all those guys playing for Spain. And so he was the most accomplished European team prospect that there has ever been.
Oof. So
incredible. You really don't understand the magnitude until you hear that he was a star at 12, signed at 12, and really special. It's incredible, first of all, to hear that 2 teams passed up on him, given the entire history. I mean, that was
3.
something else.
3.
Yeah, true. I wanted to touch on, I think that there's been a lot about the shape that he's in and whether he's in the best shape possible and what they've kind of done to try and get him in the best shape possible. What can you share and kind of tease from the book about what you touch on, just making sure that he's at the best possible shape to, contend at the highest level?
Well, and let's be honest, it's been a concern throughout the course of his career. The pre-draft process, one of the knocks on him was, the diet, conditioning, the discipline. Not sure that's going to be there. There were concerns about that. That's one of the reasons that, that Vlade passed on him. Vlade also just didn't think he was superstar talent, but that intel was accurate. It has been a concern throughout his career. He's also a 5-time first-team All-NBA selection. He's yet to hit his prime, So, and it's funny, like Patrick Dumont, the Mavericks governor, I guess like a week or so after the trade, gave an interview to the Dallas Morning News, and I appreciated, because I reported that the condition concerns were a big part of the motivation for the trade. So I appreciated his confirmation, but he talked about, all these NBA legends who are like these, the epitome of hard work. And one of the guys he mentioned was Shaq, which is like, brother, yeah. I mean, come on, dude. Like, yeah, come on, man. You obviously you're not really familiar with NBA history, because the thing is, Shaq is an example of a guy who was so talented that he could play his way into shape almost every season of his career and still be one of the all-time greats. Yeah. Luka, the conditioning stuff has ebbed and flowed. There's been times where he's taken it seriously and you've seen that commitment pay off. And there's been a lot of times where he's playing, 10 or 15 pounds heavier than he should be. And look, he's a big, broad-shouldered guy. Part of the reason he's so dominant is because he is able to bully guys physically. Like, he's got, he's a thick-bodied guy, and that works to his advantage. But he's also got a frame that, if he enjoys a few too many post-game beers or, too much meat and potatoes, like he can add weight pretty quickly. And that's happened on multiple occasions throughout the course of his career, including early this season. It's been a concern for the Mavericks throughout the course of his career. And he's been a 5-time first-team All-NBA selection who took one team to the Western Conference Finals and then a completely different supporting cast to the finals before he turned 26 years old. So, yeah, it's a legitimate concern. And he is on the trajectory of not just, forget Hall of Fame. He's on the trajectory of being in the single-digit best players of all time conversation.
Well, yeah. I mean, one thing me and Luka Doncic have in common, we like to drink a little bit and eat meat and potatoes. So,
listen, the problem is, I think his post-game routine and my post-game routine are way too similar. So sometimes summer conditioning program.
That is an issue now, for sure. I think I kind of want to stay in this realm now that we are kind of talk about his physique and his shape and all that good stuff. Just what was the impacts, especially like you diving into it in your book, I'm sure, just how it had on management, how it had on the staff, obviously with Rick Carlisle being there for a little bit and then Jason Kidd also. Just what was that like, the type of strain that it might have put on those guys to deal with that?
And I'll be honest with you, Carlisle kind of punted on the ability to have any sort of real direct productive communication with Luka literally a week into Luka's career. And I detail in there this disaster of the team meeting in a Toronto hotel ballroom where it was confrontational. It blew up. It wasn't even confrontational to Luka. It was like the whole team basically was at a point where they were going to revolt against Carlisle. And it cracked the foundation of his relationship with Luka to where Carlisle's strategy from about, I guess, late Luka's rookie year, when Carlisle realized this is a power struggle that I could lose. There hadn't been many. That was one. But from that point until Rick left, Carlisle's strategy was kind of to kiss Luka's butt, regardless of the circumstances. Were there concerns about conditioning? Yeah. Was he going to do anything about it directly? No. And it was a little like Kidd tried. And again, like there were times when Luka did come in shape or did handle his business on that end. But part of this, Nico really lost the ability to have any kind of productive communication with Luka as well because of decisions he made firing critical members of the Mavericks support staff who were also had become inner circle people for Luka. These are people that were with the Mavericks before and helped Luka make this massive cultural transition as a European team coming to not just America, but to the NBA. Casey Smith was a director of health and performance, one of the most respected guys in his field. Had been a Team USA trainer for 2 Olympics, had been with the Mavericks for 20 years. Like, this is a guy who Dirk trusts with his life, right? Helped keep Dirk productive deep into his 21-year career. Last year, I think the wheels fell off a bit. That happens with 40-year-olds, with the exception of LeBron James. He fired him before last season. And honestly, when that happened, I thought things were going to go south quickly. They still managed to make the finals, but then they followed after the finals, fired Jeremy Holzhauer, their strength coach, Casey Spangler, a massage therapist. Again, people Luka liked, Luka respected, Luka trusted, and replaced them with Nico guys who Luka didn't know, certainly didn't trust. And so the communication between, and Luka has his own body team that he hired before last year. The communication between those people and the Mavericks became tense, infrequent, unproductive, and there's a lot of tension that built up there. Certainly the relationship between Luka and Nico Harrison became frayed. But saying all that, Luka's commitment to the Mavericks wasn't in question. The guy he was in the process of closing on his forever home in Dallas. It wasn't like any kind of consideration. Will Luka sign the Supermax this summer? Hell yeah, he was going to sign that thing. The Mavericks decided they didn't want to make that investment in him, which, look, the other thing, it's not just like he's got to get in shape. The concern for Nico Harrison and the Mavericks was that Luka's body was going to break down in his prime. He has had now 4 calf strains. As of the fourth one at Christmas, there was 4 calf strains to the same calf in a 28-month span. There was real legitimate concern there. And they felt like the Supermax would be a bad investment. I think the Supermax, if you really want to trade the guy, I think the best thing that you could have done was Supermax in the summer. You got to wait another year. Give it a year and a half. If you still feel the same way, Luka's locked up long term, and you announce to the league, we're trading Luka Doncic. It's going to happen this summer, and let the biggest bidding war in NBA history begin. They decided they had to do it now. They had to do it in secret, and that naturally deflated the value that you could get for them.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, it's just a lot to take in, because again, there's so many moving pieces to that with the trainers and conditioning people around the Mavs that they let go, especially after making a finals run or making a Western Conference finals run. So just for those of us who weren't privy to a lot of the stuff, it comes as a shock. So I do want to touch on the trade a bit more, but I also want to ask about, you touched on some of the former teammates in the book, the kind of fumbling Porzingis, the fumbling of Jalen Brunson, and I know Kyrie, they had to take that first year to keep that top 10 pick. What can you kind of mention or tease from the book about what happened with Porzingis and Brunson and why those, either relationships didn't work out or the contracts didn't work out in a great way? What can you just say about those guys?
Well, the Porzingis Luka thing for most of their time together was kind of your typical young ascending co-star tension that you've seen so many times throughout the league. And, frankly, when they made that trade, they thought it was going to, it was Dirk's last year. It's like the greatest hero of all time is going to pass the baton to 2 guys who have a chance to be in that conversation. And Porzingis certainly came here expecting it to be a 1A and 1B situation. And, in his mind, he might have been 1A. It's not the way it played out. It became very clear very early that this was Luka's team and that Porzingis was the headliner of the supporting cast. And that was tough. It was tough on Porzingis at that point in his career to accept that. Certainly never embraced it, but they had some success. I mean, dude, you covered the series in the bubble. They were hooping. Like the last couple months going into the bubble, through the bubble until Porzingis went down with that knee injury, that thing was clicking. And it looked like, okay, hey, the Mavericks might be something serious to deal with for a long time to come. Porzingis' injury issues certainly played a major role in things falling apart. The relationship issues, like him and Luka butted heads a lot Porzingis' last full year here. Rick Carlisle couldn't manage it because he didn't have good relationships with either guy. Somebody told me the one thing Luka and KP had in common at that point was they couldn't stand Carlisle, but that wasn't something they could bond over. And then, honestly, after Rick left, like Porzingis and KP, KP and Luka, like they basically dropped stuff. They never talked out their issues. It was like, hey, fresh start, at the start of training camp, good to see you. Let's go. but it didn't click. It didn't fit. And Nico Harris and Mark Cuban, and the Mavericks decided they had to move on from Porzingis, who I think, honestly, his success in Boston was partially paved by the disappointment in Dallas. His ability to embrace that role and really fit there. And then the Brunson relationship was great with Luka. They came in the same draft. They were cool. And Brunson just got better and better and better and better, and was a co-star on the Western Conference Finals team. Now, the Mavericks never really valued Brunson. Really, that's what this gets down to. They tried to trade him on multiple occasions, including, by the way, offering him to the Knicks, along with 18 and 31 in the Tyrese Halliburton draft, trying to get Tyrese Halliburton at 8.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And the Knicks took Obi Toppin on that pick. And, they didn't think 4 years for $55 million was a no-brainer of an extension for him. He wanted to sign it. Wanted to sign it in the summer. Went back to him in early January after he emerged as a starter, a quality starter, kind of kept the thing afloat while Luka was shut down for a while to nurse an ankle and get in shape. And put it on the table after the trade deadline that year when Dorian Finney-Smith signed the same extension. And Brunson was like, nah, I've outgrown that number now. And, ended up getting damn near twice as much to go to New York. Well, obviously, there's all kinds of family ties as well. But this idea that, he was always going to be with the Knicks, no. The Mavericks fumbled that one. They recovered because they lucked into Kyrie being available for pennies on the dollar midway through the next season. But, fumbling Brunson for nothing was a massive, massive setback. And after that was the first time that Luka started to get involved in front office discussions, started to push on the front office. We got to get better. We got to make upgrades. He had never he had never wanted to be part of those conversations until after they fumbled the bag with Brunson. And then Luka's carrying this franchise on his back. They're struggling to stay above 500. And that's when he started pushing, like, dude, we've got to make some upgrades. And that's when there started to really this fear of, if we don't fix this thing, the guy might rightfully look to be traded. That's when that fear really started to set in.
Well, you touched on Luka getting involved in front office stuff. When do you think you usually see, superstars or vets established for a while kind of get involved in that? When do you think Luka kind of realized his power there, or really try to start making an impact using his greatness from that perspective?
Yeah, like I said, I don't know when he realized his power, but he first started to, exercise it, I would say, that season, right after the Brunson departure. And, it's funny, I reported at the time, there was a lot of pushback, and Luka didn't want it to be out there because he didn't want this perception that he didn't believe in the guys around him. He didn't want the feeling that, he was dumping on his teammates to be out there. But the controversy wasn't that Luka felt like the Mavericks, or the news, I should say, wasn't that Luka felt like the Mavericks needed an upgrade. I was like, yeah, so does anybody who's ever bought a ticket or turned on the TV and watched them. Are you kidding me? Of course they needed an upgrade. Christian Wood was their second leading scorer on that team. Are you kidding me?
That's true, yeah.
Give me a break. The news was that for the first time in his career, Luka was having those kind of conversations with the front office, was pushing the front office, and that it got to a point where he felt like, okay, hey, I've got to be involved in these discussions because, he was at the point 3.5 years into just a historically spectacular career, and the roster wasn't better at that point than it was when they got drafted.
Kind of, I think it's kind of funny, this transition especially, but just with player empowerment, how it is in the NBA, with Luka gaining that power to kind of dictate what the front office does. And then enter Nico Harrison, right, who didn't draft Luka, wasn't a huge fan of his work ethic and all that, like you touched on earlier. This made you write a whole other chapter about what obviously happened with the trade. Can you just touch on what the book probably touches on a little bit about this deal, the magnitude of it, probably the biggest trade in NBA history, like we mentioned, probably in sports history even, especially assuming that Luka does go on to become what we think he could become?
And look, basically what happened here was Luka got his butt kissed by the organization for 6 years. And I think you could argue, rightfully so, from a strategy perspective. He's that level of superstar. After getting his butt kissed for 6 years, he got stabbed in his back midway through his 7th season. And it's just a simple fact of the matter. That's what happened. He got traded in the middle of the night, intentionally blindsided, intentionally shocked by it, because they felt like, we can't let this leak. We can't let Luke have any idea this is coming. We can't let his agent, Bill Duffy, have any idea this is coming. And I think this never, ever happens if Mark Cuban doesn't sell the majority share of the franchise, period. And I'll be honest with you. So Cuban, I don't know if Cuban lied about continuing to have basketball control or was just trying to speak it into existence, but it wasn't the case, clearly. Like, it was not the contract of the sale. And like, the second the sale was done, Cuban essentially was pushed to the side of the front office discussions. Like, okay, you can weigh in all you want. We'll put it in this round file underneath the desk. But this never happens if Mark Cuban has control. Cuban absolutely cherished having this guy. And look, Cuban for 21 years had Dirk. He wanted to have Luka he wanted 20 more. Luka's probably not playing 20 years. He said himself he'll be back in Slovenia before then. But he planned and would do everything possible to make sure that they could keep Luka in Dallas for his entire career. But with Cuban not having any control, Nico Harrison had all the power. Nico managed up and convinced Patrick Dumont that this Supermax for Luka would be a bad investment. I've had a difficult time finding anybody around the NBA who would agree with that assessment, but that's what happened. And so, again, a pivotal moment was Cuban selling majority share of the franchise, and as a result, having zero say.
So that's the thing that I think most people are maybe just confused about as well, is the you can sell off whatever stake you want on the team, but like the basketball control is the puzzling part, where you're I guess essentially allowing people who probably weren't heavily invested in basketball, weren't following it too long, according to some of the comments they've made. Now these guys are essentially controlling what happens with this franchise that Mark, I think, felt like he brought from the ground up. I mean, we know about the Steve Nash and how he had to let him go, and that was very tough. And he talked about the relationship he had with Steve as well. We all know about Dirk and now Luka, but that part just felt so puzzling, is that as soon as you give away basketball control, like I had heard that he, there were reports that he might have kept basketball control.
He
but
said it.
yeah.
It just wasn't true.
Yeah. That's
and I'll be honest with you. When I realized that Cuban did not have basketball control anymore, I thought that was a good thing for the Dallas Mavericks. Because, look, man, Cuban made a ton of mistakes. I mean, yes, they won a championship with Dirk. I think you could say they won only one championship with Dirk. Like, I think you can, put it in that perspective. And like, there had been a lot of personnel missteps, like we just talked about, along the way with Luka. And I did feel like Cuban not being in charge there was ultimately going to be a good thing for the Mavericks. But I just never imagined that Nico Harrison would make a decision to trade the guy that everything was being built around months after you made the NBA Finals. It's not like, well, he's got a chance to be great, but we haven't seen it yet. You'd seen it consistently. 5 times first team All-NBA selection, fresh off the finals, led the league in scoring last year, averaged damn near a triple-double while doing it in the playoffs. And honestly, like, there were times in the playoffs he was struggling. He still led the league in points, rebounds, assists, steals, minutes. Never been done before. So it wasn't like, well, we're giving up on this guy's potential. We'll see if he ever gets there. No, he was there. He'd been there. So I just never imagined that would be the decision, especially after everything you had done and Nico had done was designed to make sure that Luka could be in Dallas with the belief that he had a chance to contend for championships. And in that process, You gave up control of your first round capital in 27, 28, 29, and 30. And now you make this move, and in Nico's own words, create this 3 to 4 year time frame. It's tough to do the math on that and have it make sense.
Yeah, that's honestly, before we do transition to the next question here, that still kind of baffles me to this day. So it's still kind of hard for me to process that Luka's in a Laker uniform. But the guy that was traded for him, obviously, that ended up in Dallas, and Anthony Davis. Can you just talk a little bit about what that trade has done to the Dallas Mavericks culturally? Obviously, we've seen the Fire Nico all over Twitter, all throughout the arenas, and I'm watching on TV, hearing fans chant Fire Nico, whatever, sell the team, whatever it is. Just talk about a little bit about the culture in Dallas now and what the plan is presumed to be that Nico had.
Yeah, and listen, there's been some misfortune, certainly. I mean, AD was hurt when they made the trade, came back to play in that first home game, was spectacular, and re-aggravated that injury. Kyrie tears his ACL. Year one of this 3 to 4 year time frame's kaput. Year two's in significant jeopardy. You know, they've had all kinds of literally nights where like, okay, who's our 8 so we can actually field a roster, those kind of things. So there's been some major misfortune, but there was outrage, visceral outrage from the fan base. I felt some of it because I'm the one who's reporting on the reasons for the trade. I've been branded a Nico mouthpiece, but there's visceral outrage from the fan base. And you saw it in the protests, like you've seen it, and as you mentioned, and all the chants. What you're seeing now and you're feeling now is that outrage is turning into apathy. And the worst thing you can have as a pro sports franchise is an apathetic fan base. And the one thing I don't think Patrick Dumont, there's a lot of things I don't think Patrick Dumont had any idea about, frankly. One major thing, though, I don't think he had any clue what the financial ramifications of this trade would be. You think a $345 million investment in Luka Doncic is a bad deal? This trade is going to cost them a lot more than that over the course of what that contract would be in terms of season ticket cancellations, blackened butts and seats. You're not getting the parking. You're not getting the concessions. They're trying to get a TV deal after the Bally Sports thing blew up. Merchandise sales, sponsorships. This trade's got massive financial ramifications that are not good for the Dallas Mavericks.
I just don't think people think about those tiny things. The global superstar, obviously. I mean, the jersey sales internationally, the amount of people who probably wake up in Slovenia to watch him play, not just Slovenia, but all across Europe.
Oh, and the emotional investment in this guy who they got as a kid. He was a baby-faced teenager.
Right.
He came over here. And, look, does he have flaws? Obviously. They're apparent. But, boy, did they love him. And they do love him. You've got all these Mavericks fans now that are like, are we seriously rooting for the Lakers? Lakers playoff ratings in Dallas should be through the roof. I'm serious about that. And I would say they're rooting for Luka. They're rooting for the Lukas, not the Lakers.
But the Los Angeles Lukas.
Yes.
It fits. But I think it just kind of screams even more at the fact that loyalty or whatever that looks like, not just in the NBA, but in pro sports in general, is ever shifting. Because something like this is something that the three of us didn't even see this happening. Tim is literally boots on the ground in the organization and had no clue, along with the rest of the world, that a trade of this magnitude.
I knew, that the frustration with them was high. I just couldn't imagine it hit the threshold if you actually trade them. And you mentioned that word loyalty, and again, I think that it is an especially important word for the Dallas Mavericks fans who had Dirk 21 years, one franchise, never been done before. We'll see if it's ever done again. I mean, obviously, the odds are against it. The statue outside the arena where there were these protests literally says loyalty never fades away. And, again, I've reported on Luka's flaws, conditioning, petulance that you see some I don't know, say fairly often. I've reported on that stuff. The one thing you cannot say about him was that he lacked loyalty. And there's a chapter in the book that focuses on the Slovenian national team. And the reason that I thought that was important is because it illustrates that this guy's natural inclination is to lean into loyalty. Not only that he plays for his national team every single summer, no matter what. I mean, fresh off the finals, he was getting freaking shots to numb the pain in his chest. He'd been on a bad knee through the playoffs. He still plays for Slovenia last summer, which, you know, every other superstar in the league, it's a case-by-case, year-by-year decision. Not Luka. The fact he plays for Slovenia, period. He had a Spanish passport. He's of Serbian descent. These are established European powers. Before he played in Eurobasket, he could have decided that he was going to play for either of those teams, either of those countries, instead of Slovenia. But he said, no, I'm Slovenian. I grew up in Slovenia. I'm loyal to my country. Now, country and team, it's a little different, but the guy very firmly and clearly wanted to spend his entire career in Dallas. The Mavericks had managed to eliminate the logical reasons that he might have had to consider looking to leave. And then, you know, Nico Harrison and the Mavericks essentially changed their mind and decided to dump him.
That's real. The last thing I personally have, Jared, I know what else you have, but the last thing I want to ask you, Tim, is just what is it like for you to write a book? You said you spend a lot of your off seasons doing that. I've seen how hard you grind during the season, whether it's flying, hotels, all this stuff in the arena, morning shoots, late shoots. It's an absolute grind that I think a lot of people don't really realize, and maybe they don't have to, but you're doing that and then also writing a book about this generational star. Just talk to me about what it is like for you to do that and spend so much time, almost probably your off season when you're supposed to rest, continuing to work.
Yeah, and I do have to say, like, I'm very appreciative of my bosses at ESPN for allowing me to take this on. And I, scheduled it to where I guess it ended up being about 95% of the work on these books was done during what usually is kind of your time to relax a little bit during the summer. And I say 95 because that final chapter was right in the middle of this season, right when like everything's going great. But you're doing reporting and stuff, like all the stuff I report on the Mavericks throughout the course of seasons. That's also material for the book. So there is some carryover, but it was a very challenging professional project. And, I'm not saying I'll never write a book again, but I'm not eager to jump into another one anytime soon. I'm looking forward to at least having, some summers where, I do get to relax a little bit during the summer. I do get to enjoy some downtime, but, it's satisfying to see it to the finish line. A little bit stressful, certainly, but it's pretty cool to have your name on a book. And like I stopped by Barnes and Noble last night with my boys, and saw it in the bookstore, that kind of thing. It's a pretty satisfying deal.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite, moment when you're writing this book, or do you have a favorite interview or anything like that, or anything that you can kind of relay, and not give it too much, but just a favorite moment or something that happened in the book that you were like, oh, this is great, or this is not what I expected it to, not how I expected it to go, or anything like that?
Honestly, my favorite part of writing this book was going to Slovenia. And this was the summer of 2022. I went to Slovenia for a week, and then I went to Cologne, Germany for group play in Eurobasket to see Luka play with the Slovenian national team. And Luka didn't make eye contact with me on the entire trip. He wasn't necessarily excited about the book being written. I think he relaxed a little bit when I made it clear to his agent, Bill Duffy, his business manager, Laura Best-Seger, like, hey, this is a book about basketball and the business of basketball, not digging into Luka's personal life. But Slovenia, I've never been to that part of the world. It's an unbelievably beautiful country. Like, I legitimately would recommend it as a vacation destination, but also just meeting people in this Slovenian basketball culture. there's a conversation that I had with a guy so Luka had played one friendly tournament with the Slovenian national team before Eurobasket. This is when he was 16. And I met with a guy who was on that team, and he was telling me just stories. There's a great story in there that I thought kind of showed Luka's ruthless competitive nature, where they're playing Romania in this tournament in Hungary. And the guy who's described him as like a Pat Bev type, like a Romanian Pat Bev, catches Luka with an elbow above his eye early in the game. Blood trickling, all that stuff. Luka's over there on the bench with a towel. Once it gets it to stop bleeding, slams the towel down, storms up to the scores table on the way past, tells the coach, put me back in. First possession, he basically calls for a pick and roll that was going to make this little Pat Bev fella come over and help defense. Luka, never known as a high flyer, but goes up and just dunks it on his head. Guy falls down. Luka grabs the ball, fires it in his chest, and unleashes a stream of Slovenian profanity. But again, so that's a story I never would have known about. I never could have told unless I'm boots on the ground in Slovenia. So that's the kind of stuff that was really fun for me. And also, just honestly, Slovenia is really Lake Bled, Slovenia is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. It's a really cool, beautiful country. You've got this beautiful scenery, awesome hiking, and you're hiking up to the top of these. They're technically hills, felt like mountains to me. And there's an 11th century castle at the top of the hill. I mean, it's pretty cool stuff.
Oh wow.
Okay. Nah, I kind of want to stay in it. This will be the last question for me, actually, too. Sticking to the book, you talked about how Luka kind of, didn't even cut his eyes at you at all whenever you did go to Slovenia to go get that extra scoop. How are you hoping this is perceived, by the basketball world, no matter who that involves, reporters, fans, players? Just talk to me about that.
Yeah, honestly, I just hope it's perceived as a fair portrayal of a fascinating generational talent and a spectacular and chaotic 6.5-year run with the Dallas Mavericks. And look, there are Luka fans who are irate that I wrote a book about him. Oh, you didn't have his permission, and okay, whatever. And Luka and I, they're definitely he's called me out publicly on multiple occasions because I'm covering him, I feel fairly, accurately, honestly, not always favorably, right? Dude. But I'm also, I think the book makes it clear what a special talent he is and how spectacular of a career that he's had. But his flaws aren't ignored. Now, neither are the deep flaws of the Dallas Mavericks organization, of people who are no longer there and of people who are still there. But again, I think it's a fair and accurate portrayal of an organization that had this generational talent that's shockingly, after 6.5 spectacular seasons, they gave up on.
Yeah, it's truly incredible. I'm excited to read it. I know I found a Barnes & Noble not far from me in Studio City, so I plan to hit that one up, get a copy of the book, and dive right into it. Tim, I just wanted to kind of open the floor up to you. If you had anything you wanted to kind of share before we just wrap this up. I know we've taken up a lot of your time, so I appreciate you joining us. But anything you wanted to kind of closing statements that you got?
No, I just really appreciate you guys having me on, and your interest in the book, and really respect the passion and professionalism that you guys cover the league with. And Tomer, if I see you in the playoffs, I got some buckets for you.
Okay, well, I've been getting in better shape, so you got to get back on D.
Me too. I've been on that Luka conditioning plan all season long.
That's crazy.
Oh, that's amazing. That's a perfect little bow on that episode.
Before we do cut out, can you just tell, the fans, the people, where to find your book, where to purchase, all that good stuff?
Yeah, anywhere that you can find books, probably the easiest for everybody, just pick your phone up, The Wonder Boy on Amazon. That's probably the easiest place to find it. And again, if you get one of the early edition copies, you're not going to get the final chapter that explains what the hell happened this year. Proof of purchase. You can find the link on my Twitter profile. Proof of purchase. You can get that copy sent to you via email as a PDF, and then it'll be in the later editions. It is on the already included with the ebook.
Oh, so there's already a limited edition version that doesn't even include the final chapter. Oh, that is a collectible right there.
I need that.
They were printed before the trade was made.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. I need that. That's incredible. Wow.
Those are the ones that are out there now, and hopefully we're going to get to the full version very, very soon.
I will get to the book. Is called The Wonder Boy, Luka Doncic and the Curse of Greatness. Tim, just thank you for taking the time to speak with us again. I know you're in the middle of an NBA schedule. I appreciate you a lot. I appreciate your friendship and being able to work with you in the league, but also you taking the time to be with us here. It is certainly appreciated, and we'll try to do our best to tell the world about the book. And I look forward to reading it. I'll be sure to post about it on social media when I pick up my copy, hopefully today or tomorrow. But yeah, thank you for joining us, Jerry. Anything else you got?
Nah, yeah, I'm echoing the same sentiments. Tim, we just met. Pleasure to meet you, man. If you ever want to do this again, it's always going to be an open door. So appreciate you for jumping on and really just speaking your piece about the book and all that good stuff. I couldn't be any more thankful with both of you guys just hopping on yourself. Appreciate that. But one thing I do like to do on this show before everybody dips off is call it a parting shot, which is literally just like, what do you guys take? Now, obviously, we're not drinking. It's morning time for y'all. It's barely noon for me, like just at 1 o'clock on the East Coast. I'm good right now. But just one big takeaway from the sports world or something you just want to get off your chest about a take, whatever it is. So, Tim, we'll start with you. What's your parting shot? I know it's random, very, very spontaneous. Didn't give you guys a heads up here, but give me something.
Okay, parting shot is this idea that the Oklahoma City Thunder are some kind of weak number 1 seed, or like the lack of disrespect for the Thunder throughout the league is ridiculous and insane. This is a team that is about to set the record for the largest point differential in NBA history. If OKC does not roll through the Western Conference, it will be a major upset. So, and the problem is they're going to be a problem for years to come. Is it fair that you've got this 60-some-odd win team, largest point differential in NBA history, and a stockpile of picks? Maybe not, but get used to the Thunder.
Oof. That's a great one, because I was going to make mine Thunder related, so I'm going to have to change mine up a little bit. I'm going to say parting shot. I'm going to say that the Detroit Pistons behind the Thunder have been the best story of the year. I think they've just about tripled or almost tripled their wins from last year. I want to say they had a really tough season last year, and led by Cade Cunningham and some of the vets that they've had around there, Jalen Duren's rise and Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, all those guys. They've been a very impressive team to watch, and I don't know if they'll make too much noise this year. I think they're about the 6th seed right now in the East, but they've been an absolute joy to watch. If you watch the Detroit Pistons, they're a fun team to watch, and I'm going to say that they're kind of the story of the year behind OKC and probably Cleveland. But to me, they're like a top 3 story of the year. They've been fantastic to watch, and I'm looking forward to seeing all those guys grow up. So yeah, that's fine.
Shout out to JB Bickerstaff, a strong Coach of the Year candidate.
Absolutely.
100%.
All right. It's another episode Sitting Courtside. Guys, thanks again for coming on. I hope you guys enjoy this one at home watching it. So until next time.